is to try to simulate a prairie. Many of these are prairie plants, and many varieties in here are wild, although there's different kinds of daisies. Behind this, we proceed to the area of the geranium order with impatiens, and behind is beginning of the saxifrage alleys or saxifrage order, including the hydrangea, one example being in bloom here, a white one. And then proceeding up into the little hillock are members of the saxifrage that grow around rocks. The meaning of this is actually rock breaker. And these plants grow in alpine conditions and are seen in areas of mountainous country.
Well, the video clip that you just saw was our first place winner in Category 3. Now, Category 3 is actually a new category this year for our 92 Home Video Garden Contest, and it's Category 3, which is a combination of both edible and ornamental gardens. And our first place winner is Mr. Richard and Cheryl Ishmael of Oklahoma City. And Richard, welcome to Oklahoma Gardening.
Thank you.
Richard is actually, I guess, one of the most unique gardens that we've seen, not only this year, but in years past, because he actually plants things in what we call orders or families. And Richard, tell us a little bit about your garden as far as design and how many different beds and families you have then.
Well, I basically group the families into their order, which is a little higher division. But we have approximately 27 or 28 different orders of plants, and so the plants are essentially grouped with their families in these orders.
Okay. Now, to kind of clarify that a little bit, Richard, let's give them a little bit of a science lesson on the history of some of that. And if, let's say, take Rose, for example, try to tell us the listings of how that would work.
Well, you have basically the highest part would be a class, which is a major division. But then you come to the order, and it's the rose order, or rosales is what it's called. And then that's a collection of different families, of which the rose family is Rosaceae, or a rose family. And then you have the genus, the Rosa genus, the species, such as Rosa officinalis or Rosa chineensis. And then you can come on into cultivars, where there are hybrids of different of these plants that people have put together hybrids. And the Oklahoma rose is an example, or some of the hybrid teas, which come basically from a Rosa chineensis and a Rosa officinalis that have been hybridized.
Now, what would be a good comparison, say, for individuals that maybe would remember their biology for animals? Can you give us a comparison?
It's really, I think, easier to talk about the animals because they're easier to visualize. Sometimes the plants are very difficult to put together in order. But if you take the carnivores, for instance, the carnivore order includes cats and dogs and bears and raccoons. That would be a carnivore order. The primate order would be the monkeys and the chimpanzees and the gorillas, etc. So these are major collections of animals within their order. In plants, they do the same thing to form a taxonomic group.
Okay. So most of these beds that we're seeing are a combination of orders or families that make up an order then?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Now, obviously, with that many that you've done, you've had to do your homework a little bit, and your wife, Cheryl, tells me that even you enjoy reading what is called Hortus Third. Now, tell us about Hortus Third and how you're getting all this information.
Well, Hortus Third is the big kind of Bible of plants and lists all the families and the genus and the species. It doesn't do the orders. I have to go to the Encyclopedia Britannica or some other source to get the actual ordering of the families. But it gets me down and tells me what the different families are with the genuses that make up the families and the species that make up the genuses.
Now, you're a physician. Is that kind of why your interest was drawn this way? Tell us about the history. That was an interesting story of why you're even trying to do this.
Well, basically, as a physician, if you look back in the history of taking care of patients, medications before, the last 50 years, basically were plant products. And my great-great-grandfather was a physician. I have all his old books on pharmacopoeias where they used the drugs, and they were all just powdered forms of plants or roots of leaves, whatever. So I got very interested in that. Plus, I'm an oncologist, and a lot of the chemotherapy drugs we use comes originally from plant products or directly from plants. And as you may recall, the Pacific Yew and the Taxol story, Taxol coming from that, no other source right now, and depleting the forests of Pacific Yew to try to get these drugs available to cancer patients. So that's where the interest really comes from.
Now, one of your favorite orders in your landscape is magnolia. Tell us a little bit about the combination of that and what you have in it, and maybe some medical examples even.
Well, the magnolia order I've been interested in because probably it's the originator of flowering plants come from the magnolias. At least it's thought to be that's the case, and that's the most ancient order of flowering plants, so that caught my interest, of course. The other aspect of the magnolia order is that magnolias never seem to have much disease, so the question is why. And they also have many chemicals that may be useful for different things in them, and these need to be studied. And unfortunately, they haven't been studied in great detail yet.
How many different magnolias do you have in that particular planting bed?
Let's see, we have, I think, 35 different species of magnolias.
Okay. Now, I've noticed, in addition to the different beds, you've actually done your homework on acclimation and soil types and things. You have a water garden and a bog area. How important was studying what the plants prefer to be planted in their conditions?
Well, I think that's of critical importance. A plant that doesn't have drainage, it needs drainage, it's going to die. A plant that needs overhead watering, without the overhead watering, is going to die. Some plants can't stand overhead watering, they have to be watered from below. And then the soil conditions, whether it's acid, neutral, or basic, of course, is extremely important, because a plant that ordinarily in nature grows in acid conditions isn't going to grow in basic conditions.
Right, so that applies in everyday landscaping, but is very critical when you're grouping plants together like this.
Absolutely. And actually putting these in order, many of the plants they order will require similar soil conditions, although some may require more sun or less sun, or more water and less water, but they can be planted so that they fit into that.
Okay. Now, with all of the different planting beds like this, you say you have different seasonal color and flower changes. What is probably the most order that would be in bloom now this time of year?
Well, our order that's most in bloom right now is myrtales, or the myrtle order, crepe myrtles, and we also have some other Mexican heathers and different plants of that order that are in good bloom right now.
Okay, so you get color pretty much during the growing season then?
Yes.
Okay.
We start out in February, the witch hazels bloom, and then they end with whatever the freeze gets at the end.
Okay.
So.
Now, with it being combination edible and ornamental, we've talked about your ornamental side. You have a garden in the back. Describe that to us a little bit.
Well, we have a vegetable garden in the back where we raise the beds, and we do French intensive method. That's something I've experimented with for a number of years, where you plant closely, you have to fertilize heavy and have the right soil mix so that the plants can be planted closely together. But also you tend to crop, you get your crop in and you get the next crop ready to go, so that you can plant something like peas early, come behind with beans, and then end up with fall crops such as spinach or beets or carrots.
So you easily get 3 different crops in a growing year then?
Right, you get 3 different crops, and then a lot of times I just sow the seeds together. Interestingly, we can grow carrots and spinach right together, and it makes for an interesting combination doing it that way.
So we're in transition right now with the fall garden, of course.
Right, fall garden, the seeds are planted, they're coming up, but we're still just getting into the fall garden.
Richard, you and Cheryl have done a lot of work in this garden. I tell you, it's very interesting. It almost doesn't seem like this should even be growing in Oklahoma, let alone Oklahoma City, but I'd like to present you now with your plaque, and that's from, in behalf of one of the sponsors, TLC Florists and Greenhouses here in Oklahoma City, and that's first place, and of course you'll be getting a $500 shopping spree too, so that'll help out with all these plants and maintenance too. So again, we want to thank you, and we also want to be sure and thank our sponsors again, TLC here in Oklahoma City, Smith Farm and Garden in Oklahoma City, and Southwood out of Tulsa. And again, if it wasn't for them, the garden contest wouldn't be possible. And we've had a lot of great entries this year, even though we can only have 9 winners. Let me tell you, the entries, even though there weren't as many because of the season that we've had, the quality was great and the ideas were great. So we'll be sharing a lot of other entries with you throughout the upcoming months.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
After